Alright, welcome back everyone. This one is probably going to be short because I can say without any hesitation that this is easily one of the best movies I've seen all year, horror or otherwise. I just had an absolute blast and a ball with this movie. Of course, I'm talking about Abigail, the new comic horror thriller from Radio Silence. It came out this past weekend. I finally got to see it yesterday. Apparently, it's underperformed at the box office over the weekend, so if you haven't seen it yet, I would honestly just recommend that you pause this review now and make plans to go see it because I want this movie to do well, and it deserves to do well. Now, Radio Silence has always been very dependable and consistent. In fact, through some weird serendipity, they always seem to manage to put out a new movie whenever I'm in a bit of a slump and I need something to kind of snap me out of it. They provide supremely entertaining, witty horror every time. I won't be discussing plot details at all, no spoilers here, nothing to say about that really beyond the premise, which of course has been made very public in advance of the movie. I'm not sure that that was necessarily such a great idea. I think it would have been a lot more fun and even more entertaining if they had kept that from you, and then it would have been a complete surprise when it was revealed. It does sort of change the tension in the early scenes a little bit. It certainly doesn't compromise it or make it any less fun. But because you know where this is headed in terms of this abducted child being a vampire, some of the initial scenes do kind of lose a little bit of their suspense in terms of what is being implied or hinted at or what the clues mean. But that's not the fault of the filmmakers, obviously. In fact, I have no fault with these filmmakers, and I have very little fault with this film. The cast is absolutely perfect in this movie too. Everybody does a fantastic job and they're all cast sublimely well. And this is kind of like Ready or Not. This is a movie where, although there certainly is a protagonist and an antagonist and a couple of main principal characters involved that are sort of driving the story a little bit more, it is still very much an ensemble piece. Everyone gets a moment to shine in one form or another. Giancarlo Esposito is very enjoyable in his small supporting role. Kevin Durand is funny and goofy as all get out as a French-Canadian hired muscle. Dan Stevens is also having a wicked good time as Frank, and hey, it's just great seeing evil Dan Stevens in pretty much anything, isn't it? I also really enjoyed Angus Cloud, and honestly, I will admit I was not terribly familiar with him before this movie. So I was a little bit saddened when I found out that he had passed away, very recently. And by recently, I think it was a year ago or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. But in any case, it's very sad to see him go so soon. I don't know what transpired there. I'm not terribly interested in finding out. I mean, it's not hard to guess, but, I'll leave that alone. But he was responsible for at least two of the biggest laughs that I had in the first half of this movie alone. There's a lot of witty verbal banter between the characters, and his character is not what I would call witty in a word, but he does still manage to come in and drop just the right words to put a punchline on the witty punchline. Like, it's just a great little sprinkling of icing or a little cherry on top of the sweet joke. He's the kind of guy who would be right at home in a movie by the Safdie brothers. In fact, the more I think about it, he does kind of remind me of Buddy Duress. May he also rest in peace. Man, oh man. Getting back to the brighter notes, this whole cast really does play off each other with a lot of very natural ease. I also do like that we do get to know these people a little bit before the action really swings into high gear. The movie has a lot of fun, the specifics of which I will not spoil, when it sort of pokes fun at all the sort of thriller cliches of exposition dumps and things like that. I'm not going to say anything more about that, but trust me, it is all skewered very well. Beyond even the cast, as infectious as they are, the real star at play here for me in this movie is the script. Again, just like Ready or Not, this is a movie that gets as much out of the narrative pleasures of storytelling and savoring character development and tension as it does out of explosions of blood and gore. The direction finds just the right pace to support this story with. No scene is too long or too short, there's always some element of tension. And even in the early passages where you're spending a little more time getting to know the characters and their relationships, it's never boring at all. Because they all feel like characters and not types, and they are all in their own ways very, very genuinely funny. In fact, they sustain so much interest that I almost feel like you could do a whole movie just as sort of a tense comic thriller involving this crew scheming against each other, and it would still be able to support an entire feature before you even introduced the vampire element. And I did love the vampire element. Abigail's a fantastic horror villain. She's just being utilized the same way that the shark was utilized in Jaws, where you use it to punctuate the tension and the suspense, and the rest of the time you're more concerned with how things are developing between our principal characters. Although whereas Spielberg worked with characters who were generally human and sympathetic and rootable, this is much more in the Agatha Christie tradition, as is referenced in the narrative here, and the old film noir tradition where everyone is suspect, essentially. Even our heroine, played by Melissa Barrera, isn't exactly what we'll call squeaky clean. The movie is also very sharp about when it uses its gore to spice up a scene or release some tension or just even, have a little fun. The movie does linger on the aftermath of violence in very playfully and gleefully spooky ways, maybe something you might expect from an older Hammer horror movie with Vincent Price, say, or Christopher Lee for that matter. Tonally, movies like that from that era kind of make a good analogy for this one, I would say, because while it is definitely a comedic horror thriller all the way through, I wouldn't call this a spoof. It's definitely got a very prevalent sense of humor about itself. But the actors are all playing it straight, and I have to commend them for trusting the humorous elements of the story to kind of speak for themselves without sort of, beating us over the head with it. I'm going to stay vague like this just because I want this movie to do well, and I want everyone to have a reason to see it. Just like Ready or Not, there is way too much to be enjoyed here on first sight that I would ever dream of spoiling for anyone in any capacity. Abigail is more well constructed than most of the non-horror movies I've seen this year, if I'm being honest. The movie's construction, execution, and acting are all top-notch, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. Thanks for watching. If you haven't seen Abigail yet, I do hope you guys get a chance to go out and watch it. Once again, I would love to see this movie at least make its money back. I mean, if they made an Abigail 2, I certainly wouldn't object. And at the risk of sounding redundant, it is just plain fun. Bring the popcorn. Anyways, as ever, thank you very much for watching. Look for more content soon, and I will see you next time. Take care.